This is part 2 of our little series, Avoiding and Overcoming Culture Shock. Great to have you with us, and let's dive in right now. Some time ago, I had an American colleague. When he visited me for the first time at my house, he greeted me and then went to the kitchen and straight to the fridge and got himself a drink. I know that in America, they are easygoing if the friends go to the fridge, but in other cultures, it's not the same way. Hospitality means something different in other cultures. He wasn't really aware of what was going on and how he should behave. So he needed to learn a little bit about cultural awareness in a different culture, in a different home. Number 4, you need to grow in cultural awareness. So when you come into a culture, you know maybe a little bit from what you have learned before, but this is way not enough. You need to constantly learn and grow in cultural understanding. You're in a cultural disorientation because you don't know enough of the other culture. If you grow in cultural awareness, you learn to overcome the misunderstandings. You get out of this transition period we just talked about and come into a period of understanding. You also need to be willing to overcome the cultural differences. And you need to adapt to the new culture. If you have a positive learning experience, that leads to self-awareness. Very often, if you move into another culture, you don't know your own culture well enough. But if you start studying the other culture and grow in cultural awareness, you also learn how your culture functions, what your values are, what your belief systems are. And this way you know your cultural style. What kind of cultural style do I have? What is my style in comparison with the local style here? So do I come from a shame culture, or do I come from a guilt culture? Do I come from a fear culture? Things like that very often you don't think about, but you also need to be aware of your own cultural style in order to understand the culture in which you live now. Number 5, you need to acquire cultural skills and cultural knowledge and understand cultural attitudes. You also need to acquire communication skills. What are their values? What are their emotional systems? What are their belief systems? What is their logic pattern? All these things you need to understand if you want to function in that foreign culture. So what can you do in order to gain that knowledge? Well, the first one is go and travel. Travel the country, look around, go from here to there, visit other cities and observe. Observe what the people are doing, observe the habits, and just be an observer while you travel. The second one is integrate into the culture. Well, if you travel, that's great, but if you stay kind of outside of the culture, that's not enough. You need to integrate, you need to join with the people, you need to join clubs and things like that. So integrate and eat the food and do what the people are doing, so integrate into the new culture. And during that, observe, observe, observe. That's the most important thing. Don't lecture the people what's right or wrong. Just go and observe what the people are doing and think about this. Just reflect about that. Reflect about their actions and their communication. And learn to love the new culture. So if you hate the culture, if you hate the people, if you don't like the food, if you don't like this and that, so then you don't feel at home in the new culture. So learn to love the new culture and learn to embrace the new culture. And also try to find a cultural guide in the country. Don't take one of your foreign colleagues, because they have a certain knowledge of the culture and very often they might think they're experts. But if you get a cultural guide, take somebody from the culture, take somebody who is a national, but take somebody who has traveled, who knows other cultures, who knows other countries. If they always stayed in their own country, they don't understand cultural things very well. So if you want to look for a cultural guide, take a guide or choose a guide who has been traveling, who knows a foreign culture, and if best, who has been to your own country and who knows your culture. The next point is accept cultural differences. Stop criticizing the culture. Stop criticizing the food. Stop criticizing that people are always late. Stop criticizing that they talk and you don't understand, they don't talk clearly. Stop criticizing when they are relationship oriented and not task oriented. Try to embrace the culture. Be tolerant. I think you need to have a higher level of tolerance if you come to this new culture. Otherwise, you won't stop critiquing. And certainly, avoid cultural conflict. Don't argue with the people. Don't say, well, in our country we do it like this and that's much better. And here you should do the same, you know. Don't argue with the people, stay calm and be reserved. And as I said, reserve and learn. Learn how the people value their own things. Learn how they value their food, their traditions, their communication system. And it's very important that you see that they love it, that they love their culture, and that they are grown up like this and they understand it and they function well in this. Don't criticize and say, well, your school system is bad, our school system is much better. No, do just the opposite. Embrace it and tolerate it and love it. Love it like they do. And in this way, you know, you have a greater entrance into the culture and into people's lives. The next point is that you should respect and reconcile cultural differences. Well, respect them, we talked a little bit about that in the point before, but also reconcile these cultural differences with your differences, with your culture. So there might be different values, there might be different belief systems. You believe this and they believe that, and that's okay. And you need to find the common denominator. You need to reconcile your system with their system in order to find a good compromise. Appreciate and to respect their behavior. And also you should understand the true meaning behind what's said, behind the traditions. Very often we just see the things and we don't understand what's going on and then we criticize. But it's very important for us to look behind the behavior and understand what the true meaning of that is. Understand the other's real intention. You also can learn that these cultural differences may complement each other. You can take your values and then their values and you can compromise it a little bit and see at the end, you know, they are complementing each other. Point 8. Improve your cultural competency in the long run. When you stay a longer period of time, you need to improve your cultural competency. So learn about the culture. Again, read books while you're there. Learn about and observe, as we said before, and add to the cultural understanding. So it's not just seeing things, reflect on it, write it down and discuss it with others and bring up your cultural competency in the long run. You need to learn, for example, the cultural scales. Like, are the people independent or do they live in community? Are they direct or are they indirect? Are they time-oriented or task-oriented or are they relationship-oriented? There's so many things to learn and in the long run I think you don't get by without improving your cultural competency. The last point of overcoming culture shock is be aware when you come home. When you come home there could be reverse culture shock. So you come home and you realize you have changed, your friends, your family has changed, your country has changed. Depending on the time you have been away, the change is smaller or larger. But be aware that everything has changed and that you don't come back the same way as you left. So there could be a reverse culture shock. But avoid that and do not criticize your own culture now. Because you learned other things in the new culture, you think, oh man, they are better. And you come back home and you start criticizing your friends and the people around you and think they should adopt all these things that you have learned in the foreign country. Well, don't criticize. Try to reconcile again the two cultures with each other, and learn to live back in your own culture, taking out the best things for you from the new culture that you have lived in and bringing it back home. So this way you can learn, you can reconcile, and you can be happy coming back and not get a culture shock or reverse culture shock when you're back home. Well, we talked about avoiding and overcoming culture shock. Well, there may be many more points that we could cite here, but I think these are the most important ones. If you have been in a foreign culture and you have been back home, or you still are in a foreign culture, and you have had a culture shock, or maybe you are in a culture shock, well, tell us, what your strategy is to avoid a culture shock and to overcome a culture shock. So we would like to hear from you, and if you want to tell us, please leave a comment down below in the comment section, and we will be discussing that, and it will be very helpful with your experience. If you enjoyed the video, well, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our video, and look at the two other videos we made about culture shock. What is culture shock, and the science of culture shock. So look at that if you want to learn more about culture shock. And stay tuned to our channel, and we would be happy to see you in one of our next videos. Thank you very much, and goodbye.